Hi everyone, welcome to Studio Jake. I don't usually broadcast on Saturday. I know that was how I used to do it. I used to do it on Saturday. But this week has been an interesting week in liberal hysteria, or leftist hysteria if you're one of those conservatives. But it's been a crazy week. We've got President Trump picked his nominee for the Supreme Court. And I brought back Samantha Sullivan. She works with TheBlaze and has like her own brand website and all kinds of stuff. And we had her on previously to talk about books that conservatives should read. And I wanted to have her back. But before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to Studio Jake and ring that little bell that's right next to the subscribe button, because we all know that subscriptions mean nothing. So anyway, Samantha, welcome back to Studio Jake.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
So I'll be honest, I said this a little off air. I didn't really know a lot about Brett Kavanaugh when he was first nominated. I knew he was on the short list, and the Daily Wire's very own Ben Shapiro wrote a kind of a breakdown of all the people on the short list. And the only two I was familiar with were Mike Lee and Amy Barrett. And the only reason I knew about Amy Barrett was because our esteemed writer Paul Bois, who actually someone mistook me for. He's one of our Catholic writers at the Daily Wire, and he endorsed her really early on. And when I found out that Brett Kavanaugh was the actual pick, I thought I would have to do a wellness check on Paul. But he's good, he's safe, he's healthy, and he's still writing amazing articles for the Daily Wire. So when I heard Kavanaugh, I was kind of like, oh, okay. I don't know much about him. I know that whenever he was appointed to the DC Circuit Court, he passed with flying colors. I mean, even bipartisan. And I'm just curious, just what are because he is kind of an unknown. What are your initial thoughts about him? Is there someone you would have preferred, or you're like, no, I'm pretty satisfied with this pick?
Yeah, so I was like in your same boat. I knew that Trump had a short list, but I wasn't sure who was on it, or the past, their history, or anything like that. So I started reading up before he selected his nominee, and I mean, of course, like when I first heard of Brett Kavanaugh and I heard that he was part of the Trump camp, red alarms started like ringing. Everyone knows how Trump's relationship has been with the Bush family. It hasn't been exactly good. So I was a little skeptical. I was leaning toward Hardiman, just because his background was a lot different and it wasn't identical to all the other justices, like Ivy League, prep school, same thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when he announced Kavanaugh, I don't want to say I was disappointed, but I was a little bit rooting for either Barrett or Hardiman.
Mm-hmm.
But I will say, after reading up on Kavanaugh, I think he was just a safe pick for Trump.
And also, too, he does have bona fide conservative rulings under his belt. I know a few conservatives are hesitant because when the lawsuit over Obamacare was coming out, he kind of wrote the opinion that Roberts used to say that it was a tax. But to be fair to Kavanaugh, he did not say Obamacare was a tax. He just said, oh, this would get by if it was a tax. And then when it went up to the Supreme Court, that's how Justice Roberts wrote his opinion, which is how we ended up with Obamacare. I don't really fault him for that too much, because they are the circuit court and they have to rule by precedent, not like the Supreme Court where they can they're supposed to interpret the Constitution, right? What is the constitutionality of this piece? So I don't fault him way too much for that. It's not as big as a red flag as for a lot of other conservatives, but he does have some really good pro-life and pro-gun decisions. Right. Any particular red flag that stands out for you, or you're just kind of like, yeah, it's a safe pick. I'm pretty much satisfied at this point.
Yeah. There was a ruling, and I had to write it down, right? Because this stuff is intimidating.
Yeah. So-and-so v. So-and-so such and such this.
Well, exactly. So I was reading up on the case between Garza and Hargan, and that, I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but
I've heard it, but I don't know much about it.
Yeah, so that had to do with the illegal female immigrant who was seeking an abortion while she was crossing the U.S. border. So it went to a court, and it was between 3 judges, and Kavanaugh was one of them. And I just thought that maybe his opinion there could have been a little bit stronger. He didn't think they ended up ruling in favor of the ACLU who represented her. So I thought he was kind of a little soft on that case. One judge said, I don't think it's constitutional, or she doesn't have rights under our Constitution because she's not a citizen. So I thought he could have ruled stronger. So that was like my one red flag, because I absolutely would love to do away with Roe v. Wade. So yeah, that was it made me a little skeptical, but after reading more about him, I think I feel okay.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel as well. And one thing about this that kind of I know this is kind of a dangerous path, and other conservative pundits, including Ben Shapiro and Glenn Beck at TheBlaze, have talked about, is the liberals have just lost their minds over this pick. And Brett Kavanaugh, again, he was appointed in a bipartisan way when he was appointed to the DC Circuit Court. And I hope I'm saying that. I can't remember if it's appellate or circuit, but the point is he was appointed bipartisan in a bipartisan manner. And it's really hard for a Democrat to say, well, I'm going to vote for him for this position, but against him with this position. I think that's a little disingenuous, but just the hysteria. I mean, Jimmy Kimmel didn't even know who the pick was going to be. And so he just pre-recorded his episode where he just made the pick Lord Voldemort. And then the next day he goes after Trump. At least he didn't cry this time. But he goes after Trump that manner. So, I mean, Stephen Colbert, the Women's March did the famous, now infamous, press release where they didn't even know who he was, and so they had put XX on the press release and then released it as XX. They didn't even bother to put his name. And what do you think of this? Because, like, I remember there was some conservative concern over Elena Kagan when she was appointed to the Supreme Court, but I don't remember it being to that level of hysteria. I mean, what do you make of all this?
I mean, I saw all that stuff too. I saw some people or images where people were at the Supreme Courthouse ready to protest with like a Sharpie so they could fill in the blank. And I mean, I just think that's totally laughable. I think that's why no one takes the left seriously right now. It's just crazy to think that we have this system that's supposed to work the way it does, and our founding fathers had like this vision for the balance of powers, but they don't understand that. So right. They jump on this hysterical bandwagon. They start posting. Oh, I love the post about The Handmaid's Tale. Okay, they start posting about that and how, oh my God, this is like real life is turning into The Handmaid's Tale, and it's just totally not the case. It's like they saw a few talking points on MSN or NBC or CNN, whatever, and they just kind of like piggyback off of that instead of like, I don't know, maybe like picking up one of these and like, reading something and making like their own decision and their own conclusions. So yeah, I just think they jump on the bandwagon.
And one thing that I was really confused was, I can't remember which Democrat senator it was. It was some old white guy, as most of the Democratic Party is. And he was saying that Kavanaugh has to recuse himself for any ruling that has to do with President Trump. And I don't remember the Democrats saying that Elena Kagan and Sotomayor had to recuse themselves if Obamacare ever came up in a court decision. And I'm just like, I don't. Oh, Blumenthal. It was Senator Blumenthal. I was like, what difference does that make? I mean, sure, the president gets his pick, but the Senate still gets to appoint them. I mean, have you ever heard of that excuse? Because to me, it shows that they're afraid, oh, yeah, he's definitely going to get on because we've lost Susan Collins and Murkowski. So have you ever heard of that excuse that the Supreme Court justice has to recuse himself because he was appointed by this particular president?
I've never heard that. That is just crazy. No, I have not heard that yet. But it doesn't surprise me either.
what do you think about this threat that the next Democrat president is going to pack the court with 2 more justices? Do you think that that is a real possibility? I remember when FDR, because FDR wanted it to go from 9 to 15. Man, could you imagine if FDR had 6? See, I think he got 2 picks, so 8. Could you imagine if he had gotten 8 picks? Man, America would be completely ruined. But FDR tried to expand the Supreme Court to 15, and even his own party went against him on that. And do you think that there would be that similar uproar if a Democrat president did try to pack the court that way without, adding, because he can't appoint someone because no one's dying or retiring. He's just going to create 2 new positions.
Yeah, I think that would definitely I could imagine conservatives being up in arms if a Democrat did that. With that said, I think back to whether or not a Democrat would fill the court with more liberal justices later on. I think I noticed in all Trump's picks, the nominees or potential nominees were relatively young. I think Kavanaugh is only 53. And
That's young for a justice.
And I remember I read an article about Trump saying that whoever I appoint, I plan on them being on the court for decades. So Kavanaugh is 53? That means he at least has 3 decades. And I don't know if you've heard this, that RGB is thinking of retiring too. So
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Trump might get another pick.
I don't know if this is true because I read this on Reddit, so we all know what a trustworthy news source this is. But I've actually heard that Breyer isn't doing that well health-wise, and that he actually may want to step down. Like I said, that I read that on a forum on Reddit, so that could be totally conspiracy theory. But I wouldn't be surprised because also I wouldn't be surprised if Clarence Thomas wants to retire. He's in his 70s, and I would hate to lose him because after Scalia died, he pretty much has been. Him and Scalia were definitely tied for my 2 favorite justices, but now he's number 1. So I would be really sad if we lost him. But I think now, if they do want to retire, but if he wants to hold on, if Trump gets a 2nd term, I totally understand that. But I think if Clarence Thomas wants to retire, this is his time. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I think that's so true right now. I think this would be the safest time to retire, and I'm so thankful every day that Hillary Clinton wasn't elected. I mean, really sets the tone for the country for decades to come. And there are some pretty important cases that are coming our way soon. And as we just saw with the Masterpiece Cake Shop, right? I think Neil Gorsuch has been amazing.
Yeah.
And I didn't get a chance to read up on all of the upcoming cases, but one had to do with government surveillance and whether or not the FBI is allowed to tap your phone or whatever in a criminal investigation. So I'm not totally read up on that, but there are some pretty significant cases coming our way, and I feel good right now about it.
I want to ask you about this, and this is a little bit off topic because I have some conservatives who are very, I don't want to say against privacy, but they are definitely more about, oh, well, I'm okay if the FBI spies on this person because he Googled something once a long time ago. And I'm kind of like, no, because they're at least supposed to have a warrant. And if a policeman bugs my phone because he has a warrant, I'm okay. The Constitution allows that. But just kind of like this random thing where we have to give up our privacy for our safety, I'm of the persuasion that that's kind of ludicrous. I think I watched a Netflix movie recently, Anon, where they kind of made that case. I'm kind of curious, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but where kind of do you fall on that? Are you more on the security side? And I hate to say that because that's not really the argument, but you know what I mean. When people are like, oh, we have to give up our privacy for security, or like, no, our privacy is our security. What do you think about that?
I definitely after 9/11, I think I was naturally on that camp where, you know what, if I have to allow the TSA to strip search me at the airport to prevent another 9/11, then absolutely. I think naturally, a lot of us felt like that, and then it just slowly became more intrusive. So now I'm exactly the opposite.
Okay.
I'm super anti-TSA. Every time I go to the airport, I just hate it. And there was actually an article yesterday that the Philadelphia court ruled that the TSA agents were immune from any sort of criminality or whatever, assault or unreasonable search. So yeah, I'm super anti like TSA, super just respect my privacy. I definitely don't want the FBI Googling any or pulling up my search history on Google. So
Right.
I think I went the total other way on that one.
And yeah, me too, because I write for the Daily Wire, and I've written articles about terrorism, and particularly the terrorism that Christians are facing in Nigeria. And I had to Google some things to get correct information, because I didn't just want to write up something from a single source.
Right.
And what if one day that pops up on the NSA or the FBI's list, and it's like, hey, I'm a reporter. I wrote these articles to make people aware. And so that's why I am 100. I'm saying this to say I 100% agree with you. It's like, can that search history be used against me? Now I technically did it on a Daily Wire work computer, so maybe Ben Shapiro should be more concerned than me. But yeah, to me, that is kind of ridiculous. And one last question before I let you go. Of course, this may lead to 3 more follow-up questions. You know me, but as far as like other cases that are coming down the pipeline, is there 1 or 2 that kind of hit your radar, and you're like, yeah, this one's gonna we need another Scalia or another Gorsuch on the bench for this one?
To me, really, it was security.
Right.
Like this stuff is complex and it like requires a lot of thought and research. So for me, it was that one. There wasn't another one that stood out yet, but I could easily go back and dig up 1 or 2. I'm sure.
Oh yeah, you could spend your whole life like wondering, hey, what's on the Supreme Court docket? Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I feel good. I feel safe. Like this is the one reason. Like I think that conservatives, despite Donald Trump and his flaws and whatever went down during the 2016 election, this was the big thing for conservatives, was who would he appoint to the Supreme Court justice. And that was like the determining factor of whether or not conservatives were going to vote for him.
Right.
Was a Supreme Court pick. So I feel safe right now. I think he's done a good job of picking justices.
And yeah, we'll just have to, if Clarence Thomas or Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Breyer want to retire, this let's hope we get another really good pick. So
I think Amy will be appointed.
Oh yeah, I think she's next.
Yeah, I think she's next for sure.
I had heard, and again, this is all online chatter, so this could be conspiracy theory level, but I had read somewhere that, because he's been trying to push Jeff Sessions out of the Justice Department. It's been obvious to everyone, and Sessions is just staying for spite at this point, I think. But someone had said that apparently Trump offered him the Supreme Court seat if he would just leave.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he said, I will make you a Supreme Court justice if you resign. And Sessions was like, nah, I'm good. I'm fine here. So I don't know if that's true, but that was a thing that was going around when Kennedy had retired, was that Sessions, he had called Sessions and said, hey buddy, you want to be on the Supreme Court? So that could be conspiracy theory territory, but all right, Samantha, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Sam Elizabethan, and Instagram. I think it's the same handle. I still did not memorize my own handles, but Samantha Sullivan. Yeah, you can find me.
And of course, you can find me on Twitter at RealJacobAiry. My Instagram is real.jacob.airy. My Facebook page is author Jacob Airy. And find my political writings on dailywire.com. I just wrote a piece about Mike Rowe that is really popular right now for some reason, despite the fact that I reviewed Ant-Man and the Wasp. For some reason, my article about Mike Rowe is super popular. But check those out. And also, be sure to look at my blog. It's jacobairy.blog, where I've got even more pop culture and nerd topics over there. I know today was a little off topic, but come back tomorrow. I have another episode where I review a whole bunch of comic books. So keep an eye out for that. So subscribe, ring that little bell. Thank you so much for watching. And Samantha, thank you again for coming on. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, thanks.